We have a couple more minutes before we're supposed to start. Still waiting for John McDonald and for Ron Malor. But otherwise, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know if that's the right number. Sounds like
1, 2, 3. It's a quorum. 7. How many people are voting members?
we have 5 voting members. So
We have
three is-
4.
We do, and we have another voting.
Yeah, 4.
We have 4 out of 5. That's good. But by my watch, it's still 2 minutes before 4:30. So I will, when we do formally start this meeting, I'll point out the fact that I have failed to comply
The open meeting law.
explicitly with the open meeting law. I thought that meetings required 48 hours advance notice, but it's 48 hours exclusive of weekends and holidays,
Yes.
which makes no sense to me, but it's what the law is.
Well,
Because the building is open
Explain.
during the week where people could theoretically access the meeting notice. And I understand it's now the website, I do, but they never changed. They don't update everything at the same time.
There's a reason for these. There's a reason why it's the way it is.
Since we already have several dates already scheduled,
Yes.
Yeah,
you can get all the
yeah, he
other,
already did that.
yeah. So we
Did that
don't
this
have to
morning.
do it, yeah.
Yep.
I understand that you can basically you can post a dummy agenda and make changes to that agenda at any time before the meeting begins.
Yes,
And it doesn't matter.
correct.
So,
Even make changes during the meeting.
and even then, it's,
And have an item in the agenda saying items not reasonably anticipated.
Or substantially similar.
but even reasonably anticipated, 5 minutes before the meeting starts, I can amend the agenda, and that complies with the open meeting law.
Right.
Again, doesn't make a lot of sense. I still have no additional joiners here, and it is 4:30. And I think I'm supposed to read something here. So I noticed the presence of the quorum. I'll say that under state law, public bodies may continue holding hybrid and fully remote meetings without a quorum of the public body physically present, as long as we have that here, as long as adequate alternative access is provided.
John isn't waiting.
Oh, he just appeared. Thank you very much. Good job.
Anyway. Wait a minute, I've got everybody to it.
No.
There we
We
go.
just get multiple,
Yeah.
so we get multiple perspectives. Hi, John.
You haven't missed anything.
You haven't missed anything. We're just starting.
Okay.
We have everyone except for Ron at this point. And I don't see him in the waiting room. If anybody notices somebody in the waiting room, please let me know. I've confessed to everybody present already that I failed to comply exactly with the open meeting law and notice requirements. We published notice of this meeting on Friday, which is not 48 hours exclusive of weekends and holidays prior to this meeting. So I'll point out that we shouldn't take, I don't think, any substantive action here for which we might be held accountable and criticized later on, but we can certainly have a conversation. I'll take note that we have Dave Bernstein is present. John, you and Dave have met before.
Yep.
And
Many years ago.
and we've I think everybody's in the room has met Dave. Michael Harry's met Dave remotely now. Our first item of business is resident comments. And as anticipated, there are no residents except the members of the committee present. So we'll skip that one. I didn't put approval of minutes on this agenda, my mistake, but I'll entertain a motion to approve the
Make
minutes.
a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I submitted revised minutes that were slightly revised to reflect some comments that Beth made. Any further comments, corrections? If not, all in favor of approving the minutes as most recently circulated by, I think, roll call vote. John?
Aye.
And Beth?
Aye.
Janet is an aye member. John McConnell is a voting member. Michael, you weren't present. but-
Aye. Aye.
There we go. Meeting minutes approved. This meeting is being recorded. And we're going to use AI to create minutes of the next of this current meeting. And our next item on this agenda is a discussion of remote participation technology and process. let me say a little bit more about Dave Bernstein. Dave Bernstein is, I think, probably a founding member of the Wayland Elvis Committee, who has been active for, I think, at least the last 10 years.
You started in 2011.
Well, okay, so 15 years. Pioneered clicker technology for accelerating the pace and the anonymity of town meeting process. Wayland did that successfully. We've done that in Weston, and other communities have followed along.
70 towns
70 towns out of 350,
out of 250 open town meetings.
250 open town meeting towns.
200.
That's pretty good, but still a relatively low level of participation. As is the case with most things relating to open town meeting.
Yes.
What Dave's been involved in more recently for the last, it must be 5 years or more now, is remote participation and looking into what would be required in order to enable remote participation, the technological obstacles, I guess the political obstacles as well. And most recently has been involved in not only championing Wayland's home rule petition for permission to do open town meeting with remote or hybrid technology, but also has been involved in more general legislation, which would enable any town that elected to do so to adopt that approach. And most recently with respect to a pilot program that got some airtime in the legislature so far. I don't think it's completely dead yet.
It's completely dead.
It is completely dead. Is it all?
Well, I don't know that for a fact, but July 31st is generally viewed as the end of the session.
Yeah.
And every attempt we've made to do an amendment to the budget to various other acts has been declined.
Yeah.
So it was extremely unlikely.
So, and one of the primary objectives of this committee is to thoroughly evaluate remote participation, see if it's something that Weston is interested in, and if so, is it workable, and what steps need to be taken to get from here to there, and do we want to get involved in any of the collective efforts that are being made by other communities, including Wayland, to get something before the legislature that will allow towns to opt in if they want to.
What's clear is that the more towns ask for it, the more likely we actually get it.
So I've previously circulated to you, I think, everything that Dave has circulated to me. Dave asked if I could get his remote participation presentation in a form where it could be shared here and he could go through it. I think I can do that.
Yeah, let's do that. And my suggestion is, since I assume most of you looked at it, that we go through it kind of quickly, section by section, and I'll ask you for questions or concerns, and we can stop at any point and drill deep. But I don't think I need to go through it slide by slide unless you have a question in particular.
I've seen his voice actually, which is good.
So,
I liked it so much the first time I watched it.
what things you could do. I'm going to slide down here so I can.
Sure. Yeah, me.
Actually, I need my copy.
But Wayland has filed the legislation. Is that true? Wayland.
Yes, and I'll show you a slide. I'll show you all the legislation that's been filed. We've been filing legislation for the past 3 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
For the first 2 sessions we filed was just home rule petitions. The current session, which ends at the end of this year,
Right.
we file a home rule petition, Concord filed a home rule petition, and there are several statewide petitions,
Yeah.
plus all the budget amendments.
Who's your rep for Wayland?
Carmen Gentile, who is retiring, and David Linsky, who's
Yep.
the other part of Wayland, and then our senator is Jamie Eldridge.
Okay.
And we've been working very closely with Carmen's, originally his intern, now his staff assistant, Robbie Simon, who's been extremely helpful. And Robbie is running for the seat.
Now, is Concord with the same reps?
Concord has different.
So, okay.
So Senator Mike Barrett, who we
Okay,
briefed,
that's right.
Yep.
and he was very powerful, an assistant majority leader. And the name of the rep escapes me at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I just need to. Okay, so let's go through this.
I don't think it's a PDF, not a.
Oh, we're gonna.
Well, that's what you sent me, so that's what I've got. But
Okay,
you
that's
can
fine.
do Can't be a page down.
And so I'll just stick my finger there. Okay, so this is the history of Wayland doing remote participation. Starting, back when size of the town, all that stuff. And the benefits we got out of remote participation. You're doing the benefits we got out of electronic voting. You've done the same thing.
Yes.
You've enjoyed the same benefits. The key thing on this slide is this participation gap. That 3 times as many people vote in a non-federal election as participate in town meeting. It's so look, 600 out of 10,000 registered voters. That's like 6%. But that's actually high compared to surrounding towns. So this is data from the League of Women's Voters. You can see that, it's often as low as 2%. We hear that towns are having to lower their quorums in order to be able to conduct town meetings. And the point at the bottom, just as soon as we mastered electronic voting, people were saying to us, why can't we do this remotely? We can do everything else remotely. Why can't we do this? The answer, of course, is A, it's hard technically, and B, it's not legal.
Just tips, right?
Yes. Other than that, so the request isn't frivolous. I mean, there are people who have young school children. They don't want to leave them at home for 4 hours on a school night. There are people who have disabilities. There are people who have caregiving responsibilities. There are people who have to go to work early the next morning. And some towns don't have the facilities. They don't have a venue that can accommodate all of the people who want to participate. Might even be parking space. This isn't just a problem of a couple of wealthy towns on the eastern side of Massachusetts. You look, there are 260 towns that use open town meeting, and they're spread all across Massachusetts, and they've got 1.7 million people. So the impact of this is not just limited to a few of us, it's everyone. And we hear the same stories across the state. So the goal is to move from this, which is what me and you are doing, using on-premises electronic voting, to using the internet to allow people to remotely participate. When we did the on-premises stuff, we studiously avoided the internet. No internet connections. We're just not doing that because the possibility of break painting and all kinds of other issues was strong. Now we had to tackle that issue. So these were the 4 technical impediments, which we'll go through, making it simple, detecting an internet outage, making sure that votes aren't tampered with, and the impersonation problem. If you can't see who's there, how do you know who's voting? So making it simple, basically it comes down to building into the software a knowledge of Robert's Rules of Order and how town meeting works. So, then if you want to participate remotely, you go see the town clerk before the meeting. You might have to schedule a 5-minute appointment to do that. There's online software to do that. You're issued a voter code, a password, and an audit code, and I'll explain those in a moment. Everybody logs on to the same web page, one URL. It's on a piece of paper you get from the town clerk. And there's one button for every activity. And it basically leads you through. So a couple weeks ago, I prototyped this. So here it is. You can type in your voter code and type in your password and check in, and then you can get a one-to-one video audio conversation with a member of the town clerk's office. And you check in just like you would on premises. You state your name and your address. Staff person looks you up, makes sure, yep, that's that. He's a registered voter. And then boom, you're checked in.
And when is that happening?
Well,
Right at the start of the meeting, if they were to be appearing in person.
Whenever that person walked up to the check-in.
Okay. Gotcha.
And it's analogous to checking in on premises.
Okay.
But they will have been previously credentialed with
Right.
all of the
We
information.
would know it's coming.
Right.
Right.
The one difference is that when you check in here, you take a snapshot of your face. And we retain that snapshot for the duration of that one session only, and then it's deleted. So it never gets to the internet. It's captured locally. And the reason we do that, you'll see, is that throughout the meeting, we periodically check that you are who you were when you checked in.
Okay.
So that's the authentication mechanism. Now, Rick could go to on-premises town meeting in Wayland and check in as Dave Bernstein. You could say, Dave Bernstein, 25 Gleason Lane. And unless somebody standing nearby knew what I looked like, he would authenticate. It's the same thing here.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you say who you are and your picture is taken, then you will authenticate. But we can't do more than that. I don't want to actually, but you can't ask for a driver's license or some other pass, and you can't do any of that because you can't do that on premise. So the authentication is as strong as it is on premises, but we check periodically through the meeting. And you'll see the main deterrence here is that if you impersonate someone else at town meeting, that's voter fraud. And that has serious criminal consequences. I believe there's jail time.
For the 5 or 10 people who've actually committed voter fraud in the last 20 years in the United States.
Oh, then I know all of them.
I'm not going to comment.
And maybe a foolish question, but the people obviously will know that their face is being snapped.
Yes, well, we will make this all very clear.
Okay.
Okay. So
Could I ask one question, Dave?
certainly,
When you, at the beginning there, does the person have to go in person to the town clerk to register?
yes.
Oh, and what about if they've registered once, do they have to do that for every single meeting?
You can do it. Well, our theory for Wayland, and I can only speak for Wayland, is you would do that once at the beginning, before town meeting starts, and the town clerk would establish the schedule. You might say you have to do this within 3 days of before 3 days of the first session.
No, I meant if you sign up, if you sign up in
authorizes
person.
That authorizes you for all sessions.
All sections for that
That-
one.
That one town meeting,
Okay, so.
not all
Yeah.
future town meetings.
Right.
No, but,
Now,
but it's the same as being a registered voter.
Yeah.
If I go to, I mean, I think that is the answer to register to vote, you go to in person to the town hall to register to vote. And then I'm a registered voter. But when I want to, as a registered voter, participate in town meeting, I do that from my living room using the system.
so this
Right.
is a town decision.
Mhm.
You could decide, as we decided, that we want people to register with the town clerk in person once before each town meeting. And then they can connect.
So it's a
into
separate, so it's separate from being a registered voter.
Correct.
Yeah.
They can then, for each session, they can connect into their living room.
And it makes sense because the staffing is going to be different. If you have 75 people registering for one meeting, that means that town clerk has to have staff available for the remote and staff available
Yes. But in person,
for a person. So if you do that for all town meetings for the year,
no.
it doesn't
Well,
make economic sense.
You'd have to have some, if you
Yeah.
chose to do that, you would have to have some way each year getting a sense for how many remote participants you were likely to have. And that would be less accurate than
Yes.
what we're proposing here.
But I think, this is something that we can set aside and discuss, because my argument would be, if we want to make it as seamlessly similar to on-premises participation, you would manage it the same way. And then by the same way, I mean, I went one time 35 years ago to register to vote. I registered to vote, and as long as I keep voting, I'm still a registered voter. And then the whole idea of having remote participation is so I don't have to go someplace to do something that's inconvenient, basically. And so just as I mean, I don't know what an analogy would be, but let's say the analogy is signing up to participate in an online auction, that I can do that from the same place I'm then going to participate in the online auction, my living room, call it my den or whatever. And so maybe in order to plan the staffing, you need to know ahead of time, I'm going to need 10 extra people to sign in all these people for the town meeting online. You could make it as simple as within 20, between 10 days before and 24 hours before the town meeting, you need to send the town clerk an email saying, I'm going to participate. And that way she can plan, I need the extra 10 people, as opposed to making somebody who has kids and a dog and, has to run their life and all of that, stop at town hall.
No, I'm going to disagree with you.
Well, I know,
Yes.
but
Oh,
again, I don't,
But
I
let me give you the scenario. There might be a chance that one of these voters who wants to participate remotely is an inactive voter. And as they would be required to do in person, they're going to have to present me with some documentation that
Right.
they are indeed.
But again, there's a way to handle that. When they send you the email that says, I want to participate in town meeting, presumably you're not going to wait until the day of town meeting, a half an hour before it starts to look at those emails. You look them up, you credential them, and you say, well, it's nice that you're going to participate. However, you're not a registered voter. And in order to participate, you need to actually come to town hall to become a registered voter. So that's easily handled.
So
Let's table that.
Okay.
Go on.
Okay,
let me just say that you could condition being able to remotely check in on having done some electronic transaction beforehand approved by the town clerk. So we could make it so that it is accurate, because unless the town clerk has agreed that you're allowed to do it, then the town clerk would have the number. So the technology exists to do what you want. It's a question of what the town policy wants it to be.
Right.
Because there's different, invariably, if you do something like that, somebody's going to forget. And that means somebody's going to try and check in and they're going to get rejected.
Right.
And then you're going to have to deal with that. Because
you have to anticipate every potential screw up that somebody could make.
and that is the watchword of Wayland Ellis. What we spent a year doing was anticipating every possible thing that could go wrong and deciding what we would do if that happened.
Right.
So that we did not have chaos on town meeting floor. And that's the exact same attitude, it's the exact attitude you have to do this.
Well, for what it's worth, the towns that, go ahead, John.
Dave, aren't you also given your password or your unique password at the time you sign up for with the town clerk in person?
Yes. But
So how do we, so that's another thing we have to remember. There's a information you're going to receive. It again could be passed on via the internet, but I thought that was an important component of the sort of security measures you had thought about.
So the idea is that when you check in person with the town clerk, you get a piece of paper with the town meeting URL, your username, your user code, your password, and an audit code. It's written on a piece of paper. You could say that that's good for 5 years.
But you could also do it two other ways, which is you could make it look, again, I participate in online auctions, so we can talk about that at some point and how that works. But everything that used to be in person at Sotheby's is not completely online. No, very few people actually go to auctions anymore. And one of the ways is, well, I was going to say there's two ways. You could do it such that you determine your own password, so that when I sign up for an auction, I have to create a username and a password like I do for any other website. And I can make that as long as I want. I can have Google generate me a password. There's no reason that the town clerk has to give me a password. I can generate my own password that's, 87 characters long if I want. The other thing that I can do, that you could do, is you can do it the way two-factor authentication works now, which is I sign in with my username and my self-generated password, and then they send me a 6 or 8 digit code that I then have to take off my iPhone and put in. So again, we're going to get into policy issues as opposed to technical issues, but technical issues, this is completely doable from everything
But
I've
at what
experienced.
cost?
Well, they're
That's-
dollar cost or policy cost, because there's a difference.
Okay.
The dollar cost, I mean, this is right now we're paying $30,000 a town meeting for the electronic voting. And if we're going to do this remote participation, it might be another 30,000. Or potentially, if it's the same company, maybe you get a deal and it's 50,000 for both or something like that. So that's, again, you can make a judgment about, is democracy worth $50,000 a year? We can have that debate.
Yeah.
Okay, but then there's the policy cost of the, once you get through the political philosophy things of, do we want to have democracy or representative government? And if it's representative, are they self-chosen or chosen by a vote and so on. There are a bunch of policy issues that I would argue are completely flogged to death in that Mass Moderators Association document that you circulated. That document is 20 pages long and half of its policy issues bullet pointed. They're not addressed, but they're bullet pointed. The third level is what Dave is going through now, which is the security technical thing. There's a fourth thing, which has legal, which again is flogged to death in the Mass Moderators Association document. That's another 40% of that document. And then there's just the execution thing, which is assuming if we want to do this, how the hell could we make it happen, given you've been working on it for 10 years and you still just watched it die once again.
Right.
I would say if you keep knocking your head against the wall the same way, you're going to get the same result. There's got to be a different way to
So
do it.
I have about 3 things to say to all that.
Okay.
The last one is the average time to take a non-critical bill through the legislature is 8 years.
Okay.
So the problem isn't that there's intellectual opposition to what we're doing, except maybe one spot in the Secretary of State's office. The problem is that there's just a ton of bills and the legislature's really slow. So the problem is getting enough attention on it that the legislators agree that this is something that they should approve. And we're not asking for money.
Right.
So that's that. You really don't want to send passwords over the internet. So the idea of sending somebody their password over email, I would not advise. So from my point of view, if you want to, we took it that people would be willing to stop at town clerk's office for 5 minutes once a year to authenticate for the next coming town meeting. I mean, plenty of people do that to vote in elections. You can do that anytime during the day. You got a lot of flexibility there. It's not the same as 4 hours on a school night away from their kid. But I could understand that some town might say, well, we can do that once every 3 years. But that's a town decision. That's not,
It's a policy.
it's not exactly, it's not a town decision. With respect to cost, there are now 50 companies that provide voting over the internet. And this is the result of COVID. I called one of them and said, we have 2,000 remote participants and we want to be able to vote over the course of a week. How much will that cost? $500.
Right.
So
Over the course of a
over the
week.
course of a week, $500.
Okay.
So that's a web-based platform that's hosting 2,000 remote voters.
For a town meeting that might have 5 nights of
Mhm.
session.
Right. Now, think about this. Initially, we're going to start really slow with like 1 or 2 people doing this. And then we'll add more, and the moderator will eventually get comfortable with the idea that we have as many remote participants using this technology as possible. The next step beyond that, why not allow on-premises participants to use the same technology on their cell phones and smartphones, just using Wi-Fi in the venue? At which point, you no longer have to rent handsets from OTI. And so my guess is over time, the total cost of electronic participation in town meeting goes down from what it is today.
Right, that takes care of the actual technology side of things. There's a personnel side of things in the town clerk's office, for example, which is staffed pretty thinly, to deal with the surge of people who are coming in by different doors. And maybe it's straightforward and easy. Maybe it's more complicated than it is on town meeting night, for example, where I think we've got 7 or 8 stations set up. Do we need 2 or 3 more stations set up virtually to deal with people coming in virtually? Maybe we do, maybe we need more personnel.
But
We find that out incrementally because
Right.
we start small and we incrementally add, and we understand at every step how it works.
And probably managing the flow of the meeting itself, where you've got one person who's in charge of managing the discussion, who's got a number of people in front of them in the room, some other people in a different room in front of somebody else, and some unknown, although we know it by the time the meeting gets going, number of people who are just kind of queued up electronically, and they aren't collectively visible to anybody right now.
But this is completely analogous, in my view, this is completely analogous is what happened, what preceded Zoom, which is if I go back 15 years in my career to when I was an executive at a Fortune 500 company, we actually paid Cisco $100,000 per node to do what's effectively Zoom today. And within, 8 years of that, we had Zoom, and now Zoom is practically free.
It's free unless you want to have.
Unless you want to have all kinds of extra bells and whistles and that kind of thing. So I think this is going to be the same thing with even personnel, frankly, is you're going to figure out that this gets to the implementation thing, which is how do you actually test and evaluate the test and expand and so on.
And I'll cover it.
There are ways. I was thinking about this. There are ways to do. I'm thinking about, let's say we get beyond the legislature thing, and we want to actually try it in a way that it's not going to screw up our town government. Is there a way to test it in such a way that you can let people do it, but if things happen that start going haywire, you can effectively pull the plug on it.
So, the suggestion is you start with high school students and senior citizens running mock town meetings with a mock moderator.
Yeah.
And you get that to the point where you think it's kind of working. And then you get the real moderator to sit in. And then you start adding more high school students and more senior citizens until you're up to a big number. And at that point, the moderator might decide that he or she is now willing to allow, say, 5 remote participants in a real town meeting. And you see how that goes.
Yeah.
And then you increment that number and eventually you get to the point where it's unlimited. Now that raises questions about how do you decide which 5 of the many who would want to. Well, the point is that you don't do this in this thing where you build the software and then you throw it out there and everybody has to use it. You do it very small incrementally and you refine as you go.
I was going to say another idea, and we're getting ahead, but another idea would be to do it, to just throw it out there, and then you're going to have all kinds of auditing going on in this testing period because you want to evaluate, make sure it doesn't get hacked and so on. But as you're doing that, be able to track the on-premises voting versus the remote voting, because initially you're not going to have more than a few hundred anyway, and see if the combination of the two voting methods give you a different outcome from if you just had the on-premises vote.
Okay, so that's going to follow up with what I was going to ask you, Dave, because you have representative town meeting and they are doing remote participation.
Yeah.
And I did not want any answers from you about representative town meetings. However, for the towns that do representative town meetings and allow remote participation, what is the percentage of remote participation for representative town meetings? Do you know?
So I put on Wayland's home webpage, which I sent you guys, there's actually a testimonial there from the moderator, Steve Tripletti, who's a Ripon Institute, an excellent moderator, really. And he has written up a couple of paragraphs on his experience with remote participation. I don't think he said what the number of remote participants was, but we can certainly ask him.
I went to a couple of their meetings, one in person and one just remotely, just looked at the recording of. And they have, I want to say that they have something like 190 town meeting members. It's on the order of 200, I think. And they had up to a dozen, I think, individuals who registered to participate remotely.
Up to 200
out of those. And the way that they do it is you have to be your town meeting member. If you want to participate remotely, you must register in advance, get your credentials, get some instruction. And once you're committed to participating remotely, you will participate remotely for the balance of that meeting. However many sessions it happens, if you're back from your business trip, your remote participation, you're still going to be a remote participant. And their issues are, I think, Steve probably characterized it. the biggest problem they have is operator error. People have a lot of difficulty, and in particular, many people who have difficulty getting to a meeting are older people, and they're less facile with all technology. And there's, there are policy questions that one has to deal with, I think, about how much operator error do you tolerate? Who's responsible for what here?
Who handles that?
If I can't get into the meeting remotely, is that the town's responsibility or the voter's responsibility?
Let's go into that one more double measure.
Let's see it.
Because the way that Plymouth does remote participation, they use OTI software, same vendor you're using. But what OTI provides is Zoom for listening and speaking, and a product called Voter for voting, virtual voting.
Mhm.
So remote participants have to switch between these two applications to either listen and speak or vote. And there isn't a list of people who are queued up to speak. So what Steve's view is he wants us to build this because he wants this for representative town meeting. Because this would reduce the error rate that remote participants have. And in fact, some of what we've added to our design was the result of feedback from Steve and other representative town meeting moderators who have encountered these difficulties.
Okay, so here's my question. So Brooke has a question, got a motion, people were lined up, they're asking questions. And I'm on my little iPad or my phone, and I'm listening. And then the green light goes on. Then I have to switch. I mean, if I want to listen to the meeting.
What does the green light goes on?
Oh, well, the voting
When the
starts.
vote is-
You have 30 seconds to cast
So,
your vote.
I mean, you would have to have longer. So how does that work?
Well, the moderator would not initiate a vote.
No, wait a second. I'm listening
Yes.
to the meeting.
Yes,
And then the moderator says, okay, it's time to vote.
Right.
So,
so here you are, you're listening to the meeting, you're seeing the text transcribed. It should be up there. But the moderator initiates a vote, and this is what shows up on your screen instantly. You're prompted to vote.
so I can't, unless I have another device, I'm not watching, I'm just listening on my phone.
Well, this
I have
is,
to ask, this is basic questions, I'm sorry.
no, it's fine. This is a town decision. So you can decide, let me get back to where I was.
So technically, you could have the integrated.
Wayland's view, at least our view, was that the best thing to put on the screen, you're listening, you're hearing, the best thing to put on the screen is a transcription. In Wayland, we have a thing called Waycam, which broadcasts the meeting on TV, cable channel, 10-second delay. So people could be watching that in parallel with seeing this, maybe to turn the sound down. Other towns might decide that what they want here is town meeting video. If they have, a video camera, certainly if you decide to speak, there's a camera right there. We can make it so that my face shows up on the screens and everybody sees it. That's a town decision.
Mhm.
Or you could do it the way an auction company does it now, which is you have all the text going on, including the bids as they're coming in. And up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little video feed of the auctioneer saying $100, $125, $150,
That
$175.
would certainly work on a tablet, whether it would be
Yeah.
useful in something this small is hard to say. But the point is, there are options.
Okay, that's good to know.
Well, in an auction, you can actually choose. So I can choose to watch the feed of the bids and the text, or I can hit the screen and I can just watch the auctioneer's stage.
Just remember, every option increases user perceived.
Correct.
Yeah, but the thing about the complexity is I don't view it as a reason not to do this because it's the same thing with voting for president. The fact that somebody's mentally deficient when they actually go to vote for president, they're still a human being who's registered to vote,
Yep.
and they have the constitutional right to cast a ballot. And the fact that I think they're an idiot is not my business.
Did you-
I'll keep my mouth shut for now.
Okay. Did anybody online have a question before I move on?
John, Michael,
No,
Okay, so you check in, a still image is captured, and here you are we're in the middle of discussing the main motion, and you can see down at the bottom of the various options that you can enable. You get real-time text transcribed. The speaker is identified. So this makes it very easy for people to follow along. If you decide you want to offer an amendment, you click the amend button. Now, I don't think we've seen this, but people had asked, well, what if I want to submit an amendment?
Right.
How do I do that? Well, the way that you're allowed to submit up to a 10-word amendment on the spot. So you could just take a picture of the amendment, submit it that way. Some towns might say, well, you could actually offer the name of the text of a file name that you want to upload and upload it to the moderator. Point is, it's easy to submit an amendment to be considered by the moderator if the town wants to allow that. Okay, so now I want to speak. So I click the speak button, and this is the reason I go through this, the example of prompting the user through the legal options. So these are all the legal reasons why you might want to speak: in favor, against, question, terminate, debate, etc. This person's going to make an amendment, and at that point, her request is placed on the queue for the moderator.
And everybody kind of gets, as you're showing here, gets queued up in order of their submission. So
Correct. This is a moderator's concept.
Yeah.
So the moderator always sees an ordered list, chronological, of all the people who were queued up to speak, whether they're local, meaning on premises, or remote. By the way, I'm a terrible user interface designer. That's not my thing. So, the colors and the color line issues, the choice of words would all be improved by a professional. But
This is more robust than what he has now, because right now, all he sees is a line of people standing.
Sure.
Like, he doesn't see, she wants to speak con, he wants to speak pro.
we actually used to do that in Weston. We had
Yeah.
a pro and con microphone,
Yeah.
and we had moderators that asked people, do you wish to speak pro or con, and kind of alternated. And the last time we studied this, the town didn't want to continue that practice.
However, you still, I know before, if I wanted to say something and speak, I could go up to the moderator and say, could you please recognize me to speak after the presentation? I don't know if you still do that, Rip.
You can do that.
Yeah.
You can do that, but it's a sort of separate discussion,
Yeah,
but
separate.
with some limitations. Yeah.
And one of my issues with this, Dave, is I see open town meeting. The citizens, your legislative body. And if the legislature shows up, they show up. If they don't show up, well, that's their fault. It is a democracy, so it could be a democracy by the masses. It doesn't matter to me. But what I do find, having to say I'm going, lining up and putting my name and how I'm doing it. I think a lot of people at town meetings, they listen and all of a sudden they want to get up and speak. So you have a predetermined number of people who do want to speak. But at all town meetings where a lot of people really, they're listening to the discussion, they get up and ask a question. And if I haven't clicked on my cue, I do believe people in the meeting should always have priority because they've showed up in person. And that,
well, that's the moderator's decision.
yeah, but
And I mean, it's shown here
Yeah.
whether the person is local or remote. So if the moderator wants to show preference to local stuff, he can.
Yeah, and I would completely disagree with that. You think remote voting and participation is a legitimate way to participate in town meeting, that everybody is equal. Everyone's equal. So you can't,
Yeah.
if you think it's
Can't
okay to
take
do
away
it, then
any
you
of
can't
the-
say like, oh,
Correct,
but you're like a second class participator in that.
because you're not in person.
Right.
No.
I would add, and agree, I agree with that, and I would add that you view it, and Rip may view it as it's the legislature, we have a responsibility to go and quote legislate. That's not the way 90% of people in town think about it. They think about it as, there's important stuff happening at town meeting. I'm a voter. I don't get to vote unless I jump through hoops. They're preventing me from exercising my right to determine how money is being spent on the CPC or
So John, this is a really good point, and it is a point that this committee is charged with
I
looking at.
understand.
But that is not a point that says open town meeting is something that we ought to enhance. That may be an argument to say open town meeting is the wrong way to make these decisions, and we ought to change our governmental structure.
I'm with
And
you.
I'm looking forward to your recommendation in that.
No, I know. We'll have that debate at some future meeting. Right now, we need to get on from Dave. and get-
Still say though, open town meeting as designed in
Way back.
In
1710,
1710,
1648.
1648,
right?
when only men could vote and pretty much everyone was a farmer. And honestly, town meeting was like, yay, I can do something other than work on my farm today and go see my peers and discuss things with my peers. The way it was structured then, it's just not the way it should be structured. Even if you think that it's basically still the way to go for democracy, it's just not the way it should be structured in 2026.
Anyways,
Because we are not the same body.
So just to be clear, personally, I agree with your perspective that remote and on-premises people should be treated equally, identically. But I'm always going to answer about what the technology can and can't do, and leave it up to towns, each town to decide how to deploy. So I don't want to use my personal preferences to indicate that there's.
So, Dave, doesn't this imply that everyone has,
Oh, great. That's when like Gilman is coming. Oh, yeah, right. And then.
Go ahead, Mike.
sorry, this would imply, at least to me, it would suggest that everyone has to have the same, the same device, so that, people in the meeting would also be required to say, this is what I'm going to talk on, and this is the lineup of people who are ahead of me. Right?
Well, on premises, you can physically see people lined up at the microphone.
Yes.
Yes, but you can't, but you don't know who's waiting.
What they're coming to speak and which they're coming to.
You don't know what they're speaking about, and you also don't know how many people are off, remote who might be added to that list. So you really have to have everyone having the same device, I think.
And you can have a video screen on premises that shows this speaker queue.
well, the other, I think there might be a two-step answer, Michael, which is, as Dave said a few minutes ago, ultimately the solution, assuming the technology works and you get the security right and it's, working right from the clerk's perspective and everything, ultimately the people in the room have the same interface as.
Yeah, I agree. That's
what you're saying.
Right.
However,
It's also cheaper.
and it's also cheaper, but in the interim, in order to test it, you probably want to set up two parallel systems such that you have the current system for the people in the room, and then you have this web-based interface or internet interface for the people remotely, so that you can compare and contrast, and you haven't messed around with what's actually happening in the room. So it's basically, there are phases to how you would test and implement this.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, so one of the from the field improvements is the suggestion that there be a mute button. So
Yes.
the moderator can mute the current speaker at any time. I forget who it was that did that, but it's there.
Yeah.
So
in a way that you can't in a room like this, right?
okay, so here we are. You've been recognized to speak. You can now offer your amendment, and you get a running countdown clock on how much time you have left. At any time, remote participants can look at the speaker queue, push the queue button. The moderator has lots of support. The moderator can see, the current article, the text of the article, all the details, easy for the moderator to look at. And when it's time to vote, the moderator can push the vote button and initiate a vote, at which point, as I showed you on this screen, everybody gets prompted to enter their vote. So this is the ease of use thing. This is how we do this. With basically one button for every activity, lead people through it, so that little, if any, training is required to use this. Now we have to test that and refine it. When you vote, you voted yes, and now you have an audit button up here, so everybody can audit their vote. I guess we'll get to that. in a little bit. So how do we detect a widespread internet outage? We started thinking about this because if a hacker wanted to disrupt a meeting, they would conduct what's called the denial of service attack. So that's where you get a whole bunch of slave bots to pour messages at one server and make it so it doesn't work. Why anybody would do that, who knows? But you have to defend against it. More likely, a car runs into a telephone pole and knocks out power for a quarter of the town. And all those remote participants no longer can remotely participate. So the way you make this, the way you deal with this, it's kind of no different than dealing with a power failure at town meeting, is the system, each remote participant's system browser once a minute reports I'm here. So the voting system is constantly getting I'm here messages from every remote participant. If a remote participant pushes the leave button, then they get an intentional departure. That doesn't count. If suddenly the number of I'm here messages suddenly drops by an amount that's agreed upon ahead of time, the moderator is notified. The moderator has to have decided and publicized beforehand what's the protocol if we lose more than X% of our remote participants. Might be the meeting is delayed for 1 hour while everybody gets in their car and drives down to town meeting. It might be the meeting is delayed for 24 hours or 48 hours. Whatever it is, everybody knows. The point is, if it happens, we know exactly what to do.
So here's my question. I think at Weston, the quorum is 45 registered voters. So you have 100 registered, 80. Okay. You have 80 registered voters at town meeting. You have a quorum, and then you have 20, 30 people that are participants off site. The moderator has already declared a quorum. So I have to understand, if you have a quorum, why you delay the meeting.
I'll give you an example. In Marblehead recently, they had a very controversial vote on MBTA rezoning. And I think 3,500 people showed up to the meeting, and they couldn't be accommodated. There wasn't enough room. So they adjourned the meeting for 2 days. They found another location. They obtained clickers from other communities so that they could do this, and then they went forward. But it was a situation where some number of the people who showed up to vote in excess of a quorum weren't going to be able to get into the room and participate. And that's the same thing as somebody who's online and suddenly they can't get into the room and participate anymore because the internet's not working. It's kind of the same idea.
Oh, no. So I'll have to challenge you on that.
Yeah. If people voluntarily leave, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if somebody goes through the high school auditorium and starts grabbing people and taking them away.
No, I'm just wondering. So the last town meeting, 381.
Yep.
You had overflow crowd.
Yep.
And if there was, say, 20 people in remotely, and the internet went off for those 20 people, were you going to tell the 700 people that came to and filled over to participate that, you know, it's kind of like in the Bible. How do you save it? That's a policy question.
Yeah, I think that's the line that you have to
Absolutely.
figure out how to draw.
Right.
I mean, could one of the options be, forgive me, that the meeting goes on with the people in the room and the other, you know, they would have to obviously be given the option to drive over. As you said, I don't know how many takers you get, but
Well, the thing, exactly.
can the meeting continue even if we?
We had a similar thing happen. We had a meeting with it was slow getting people into the room.
Yeah.
We had a quorum in the room at the time the meeting was supposed to start. But I delayed it for, I want to say 20 minutes to a half an hour because the line was
way out there.
way out there. Well, we could have, and maybe some people would say, should have started the meeting on time and just gone ahead with whoever was there.
That's just the people who have nothing better to do than show up half hour early for town. I mean, you just have to be realistic about, you know, you're either opening up and think it's democracy or it's just democracy, the special few who want to show up at 6:30 for a 7 o'clock meeting.
I think another,
I mean, it's just.
I think another part of, yeah, I agree. I think another part of the answer too is that this system is always opt-in. So you're not forcing anybody to use the system, which means that if in some way, the risk of an internet outage or power failure is always a possibility, it's always going to be a possibility. Part of what your opt-in, you're agreeing to the terms of service of opting into. I'm agreeing to this because I know I can do it from my living room. And part of the risk I'm taking is that if power failure happens, I don't get to vote. And that's okay. It's got to be okay. It's part of the term of service. Whereas if I'm absolutely adamant that I need to participate in this 3A discussion
Be there.
and I don't want to risk a power failure so that my vote doesn't count, I must go to that meeting in person.
Well, and the key is to have decided the policy
Yes.
early
Yeah.
and to publicize it so that everybody knows,
Right.
so that everybody can make those decisions
Absolutely.
accordingly.
Well, the other thing too is that what this would enable is, let's say that we get to a point where we've allowed this system and you're still doing remote voting and in-person voting. Right now, in effect, we already have remote voting because the way the system works is if you're after 597 people who fit in the auditorium, you get bumped into the gym and you're already then remote participating.
No, because you have a moderator and the moderator says to the assistant moderator who wants to speak.
Yeah, but
And it
that's
takes
the same as Dave's system, right? But if you got to the point where, let's say that there are 600 people who can fit in the auditorium, 600 people who can fit in the gym, call it, I don't know what the real number is, and you have some kind of Marblehead 3A thing where 3,000 people sign up, not a problem, because we use the math room for another 20 people, we use the English room for another 20 people, and they all have their tablet or whatever. So you could fit people all through the high school in their so-called on premises, but they're just in all these different rooms as opposed to two rooms.
The
So
Wi-Fi
that
not
requires,
gonna work on
yeah,
those
that
well
requires-
tenses.
But
but the interesting
yeah.
question is, you've got the main body, you've got an overflow room. What if the power goes out in the overflow room?
Well, exactly. I mean, but that's the thing. It's
The power goes out in the other room also.
No,
Not
certainly.
necessarily.
We've had questions, these issues have come up. We had a meeting where we didn't have enough clickers that were programmed for the
Yes.
overflow room.
Yes.
So we ended up taking a couple of votes at a meeting
Yeah.
when we had about 900 people there. When we had a group of voters in the gymnasium who didn't have a clicker that worked. They didn't have a voting placard because we gave them clickers instead of placards. And we ended up doing a couple of things, even one vote that required a 2/3 majority on the basis of a voice vote. And, thankfully, from my perspective, it was
Unanimous.
virtually unanimous.
Mhm.
So it was easy to call that vote. But there are things that come up where you've got these technological obstacles that occur and you just have to figure it out.
the thing I would worry about is I feel like technically all the stuff that you've talked about solves the hackability issue of the central system.
Haven't gotten it.
Okay, sorry, I'm thinking about what I was watching then. But is there a way to hack the individual nodes?
So let me finish this
Okay.
discussion and let's come back to that. That's when we need to have all of the stuff. Okay, so this is basically detecting a power failure and informing the moderator so that whatever pre-publicized policy can be enacted. And we had a good exploration of the different policies that there might be. So this is how we secure votes cast over the internet. And the reason this works is that unlike every other form of election, every town meeting vote is resolved in real time. So when the moderator declares the vote to be final, it's final. And that's it. So if there's any allegation of a problem before the moderator does that, it can be investigated and resolved at that point. And if the moderator decides that there's evidence that the vote has been tampered with, then he or she will not declare the vote to be final, would switch away from electronic voting, and use, whatever the fallback is because you've been hacked. And so what we're doing here is detecting the hacking and reporting that to the moderator. So as I mentioned, when you pre-check in with the town clerk, one of the things you're given is a secret voter code, an audit code. So every voter can, after they vote, before the vote is declared final, push the audit button, and they see a public table of every secret voter code and what vote was received from it. So you type in the first three letters of your secret voter code. So if this is me, LIN, I type in LIN, and now this line gets lit up and it says, Dave, you voted yes.
It's only showing you your vote.
It's showing everybody's vote.
It's showing everybody's vote.
I don't get to see the identity of everybody.
But I don't know.
Okay.
The only thing I know is my secret voter code.
I see.
So this is
Yes,
how
yes,
we
yes.
allow everybody to verify their vote without disclosing that vote publicly.
Okay.
So this took us a while to figure out.
Mhm.
So that's I'll when you type in the first couple letters, this should light up. It should be highlighted so it can easily be seen that it's yes. The other thing this thing does is when the moderator immediately announces the total remote vote. So Rip would announce there were 8 remote votes, 3 yes, 4 no. Everybody can see in the table, they can see the number of yeses being incremented every time there's a yes. They can see the number of no's being incremented every time there's a no. And so you can verify the arithmetic. So not only can you see that your vote was correctly received, you can see that arithmetic was correct, that what Rip announced and what people's votes added up to are the same thing. So
But are you announcing separately remote votes versus in-person votes?
yes. Well,
Okay.
so it'd be a 2-step process.
Okay.
So the vote's complete, the window closes, Rip says 3 to 4
Mhm.
remote.
Mm-hmm.
He allows some time for people to look at the table, look at decide whether or not they want to report a discrepancy, and then he declares the vote to be final if there's no discrepancy reported.
So is that just the angle of how, as long as we have these 2 voting systems, the clickers in the room, which I assume gives you some sort of. And this, you would then have someone with the like a calculator adding the 2 together. Is that just
Basically,
like,
that's
this is how it would work? This is not a thing where the two systems would talk to each other. It's just,
No, they talk.
Right.
They talk to each other.
they do it.
Rip gets the total vote. Oh, sure.
Then, oh,
2 systems could talk to
they
each
could talk
other.
to each other so that
It's actually one system.
that links with the clicker system?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're extending. The way we're doing this is we're taking the existing on-premises voting system
Mhm.
and extending it to
Okay.
accept votes from the.
Okay, so that they feed into the same.
And then what happens,
Eventually,
Okay.
once it gets developed.
what happens when you get a discrepancy report then?
So,
It happened in the Plymouth town meeting, actually, of record someone raised their hand, said my vote wasn't recorded.
And we've had that happen in Weston a couple of times. People would come forward with their clickers and say, my clicker didn't work. And if they have come forward before the vote's been declared, and I tell people this at the beginning of the meeting, if you come forward before the vote's been declared, they can rectify that and they can find a way to make that vote. If they come forward later, it's really too late, but I can give them the comfort of the fact that their single vote isn't going to make any difference because it was a 66% vote this way. And that one vote is going to change the outcome.
so we have an audit in our on-premises voting system. Since it's the same vendor you do, you have it as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you use it, but when the voting window closes, the voting system continues to broadcast each voter's vote to their handset. So there's continuous, you voted yes, you voted yes, you voted yes. If the moderator chooses to call an audit, he can then select an arbitrary number of voters, summon them to stand in a line before the town clerk. The town clerk, one at a time, she looks at the handset, says to the voting system operator, handset A4. Voting system operator says, I received a no from that handset. And the town clerk is looking at the handset. So if there's a discrepancy between what's on the surface of the handset and what the voting system recorded, that would be a discrepancy. We've had like 4 audits in the last 15 years. And our policy is any one discrepancy would be evidence of tampering, and we're done with electronic voting for that session. It's never happened.
But even, I mean, I think that the thing I'd be worried about is that you get some,
User confusion.
no, actually, I'm not worried so much about I'm worried a little bit about the user confusion, but I'd be worried about the nutcase who was like, I didn't like that vote. That's why I'm going to report a discrepancy.
So when you
throughout the whole-
report a discrepancy, a screenshot of the table is sent to the moderator.
Yeah,
So you can't report a discrepancy when there isn't a discrepancy, because your screenshot would show that there's no discrepancy.
okay.
I mean, you could lie about it. You could say my screenshot shows that I voted yes, but I voted no. I mean, there's a, I don't know what to do about that.
No,
person.
that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think there, but you have to, you have to see, I mean, you and Wayland decided that if you had one discrepancy, that would throw out the electronic voting, and my approach or another approach might be if you get one discrepancy and the vote was 80-20, who cares? You know, or even if you
Again,
get four.
this is town policy. We would not apply that policy to this.
Okay,
So let me take the next slide. So we have this notion, because we would expect some, let's just say, erroneous discrepancies, and maybe erroneous discrepancies that were a small number, as you suggest. We have this notion of designated voters. So here, the moderator chooses some number of people that he or she trusts, like who choose tellers, perhaps. And these are people who agree that they're going to audit every single one of their votes, number one. And number two, ideally, they have a second device, like a computer, that they're using to look at the audit table. And they report discrepancies, not using the discrepancy button, but they basically send us a message to the moderator's phone saying there's a discrepancy. So these are, here you would say even one of those would be hard evidence of tampering, because these are competent people, know how to use the system, and they're looking at the system multiple ways and seeing discrepancy.
And your inference would be if somebody's tampering with the system, I can't really evaluate the scope of the tampering. We're going to eliminate electronic voting and do it some other way.
Yeah.
And that would be a policy question. You could
Yes.
decide.
I think that's, I mean, it strikes me that most of this, maybe all of it, boils down to policy questions as opposed to technical questions.
Well, the idea is to build enough technology in a reliable way that you can have debates about what's the right policy for how to use it.
Yeah.
So we have to think about the worst case, what people might think they need,
Right.
and be able to solve that. That doesn't mean that everybody has to use all of that the way we.
Dave, you answered one of my questions by saying in Wayland, town already owns tablets that could belong to a voter. And what's those numbers that you would anticipate the town would have to have if they went?
Well, the last time I looked, 93% of Americans implemented this.
Mhm.
So my guess is the number is pretty low,
Mhm.
particularly in towns like Weston, Weston. Out west, probably a little larger number,
Mhm.
but it's not a big number.
Well, the other thing too is you could just say, in order to opt into the system, you need to have some fluency. You need to own a mobile device, and you need to know how to work it.
Yeah, the problem is this, because I discussed that, a lot of households, they only have one device, and that's where you probably want to have enough tablets, especially, I just think you can't do it with two people arguing. I have my iPhone and Tony has his phone that he just, sometimes can't even find it. So
Well,
I think there are more, people with only one iPhone.
in a worst case,
Yeah.
do what we do now with on-premises clickers,
Yeah.
which is the voting system provider
Yeah.
has. I mean, I know OTI has a huge number of tablets.
Yeah.
So they can provide.
And that would make sense if you go in to vote, I mean, you only have, you could.
And so when you register, go to see the town clerk. If you want, you can borrow a tablet.
Also,
I just wanted-
in Weston, like, for I doubt in Weston that there are very many houses where there's only one device. But it's also something you could find out from your population, if that's your population. And when you put part of the education process of any of this would be gathering that information. You know, if you're interested in this, how many, and I have learned, you have to be really, you can't just say like, you have an iPhone, you are specific about when people, devices they have.
So the technology uses a web browser. And so on phones and tablets, these are appliances. They all have cameras, they all have microphones. So they pretty much just work. Nothing is stopping someone from using their computer, their Mac or their PC to do this. The issue there is sound cards and video cameras. It's a mess. So there's nothing stopping a competent user from employing their computer to do this. We're not going to stop that.
Oh, I thought you said you couldn't.
No, it's just, we're not going to, well, this is what we will encourage because it minimizes the training. Because everybody knows how to do this.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they can come and get tablet.
Exactly.
Well, if they
Interrupt
don't,
for
they just, they can go to the high school and do it in person.
Yeah,
The way they
yeah,
can.
yeah.
Let me just interrupt for a second. We're getting to the end of the time that we had set aside for this meeting. I'm happy to go on and on, but that might not be true for everybody. I don't know how the folks in the room feel or the folks online.
I'm sorry if I'm taking.
No.
No, it's not- it's my fault.
Very kind of you to come.
It's a good free flowing discussion.
I have until 4 in the morning.
I don't.
Okay, not that. But I can go a little bit.
I could go for another half an hour or something like that. So.
John, Michael, how are you guys doing?
I can go for another half an hour.
Okay.
Let's end at 6:15, period.
I can go till 6.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
here's a remote participant. Checking the audit table and see the remote report discrepancy button. Then the last issue is this issue of detecting what we call proxy voting, which is impersonation.
Yep.
So I register as Dave Bernstein, but I sell my registration to some developer who wants to submit a lot of votes, and that person votes for me. So what we do is we have captured a still image of every voter when they checked in, and periodically throughout the meeting, we randomly connect members of town clerk's office in an audio video connection to do a recheck-in. And that when the town staff member sees the facial image that was captured in parallel with seeing the connection, so they can tell it's the same person or not. Now, you know, if the wrong person checked in to begin with, we can't detect that, but that's the same as town meeting on premises. So this is at least as good as what you can accomplish in the premises.
Yep.
Okay, so we've been through all the ways that we overcome the technical problems. So this is showing the extension of the existing on-premises system to have the internet connection with what we hope is a friction-free user experience. We can detect a disruptive adversary who disrupts the meeting. We can detect a vote tampering adversary, and we can detect proxy voting. So that's how we overcame all 4 of the technical issues. So then there's the question of, you know, how do we make it legal? So going through this quickly, I mean, the rationale we've already been through, why we want to do this. We went through, we started in 2021 was the first time we submitted legislation. So we went to the 192nd and 193rd session with rule petitions, got nowhere. We've been beating the bushes with other towns like yours to get people interested in supporting this and pushing on their representatives. This year, the 194th session, this is all the legislation that got submitted. So there were a couple bills. 2272 was our home rule petition. 2274 was statewide remote participation. A lot of endorsements from the Mass Municipal Association, League of Women's Voters, got a lot of help there. SB 3114 was also statewide. That was submitted to the Senate by Senator Barrett from Concord. He's been very helpful and very supportive. 4552 is Concord's home rule petition. That's not dead yet. We'll see in a minute. And then there are 3 bills right now before the Senate Ways and Means Commission. So the status, this is the status. So all Wayland's bills got sent to study. The statewide town meeting bill in Senate by Senator Barrett, and these bills down below 2197 to 2129, they are still before the Senate Ways and Means Committee. Through our Senator Eldridge, I have suggested that he do a compromise, which is a 5-town pilot. I've heard nothing about how that's going. The problem is the Senate Ways and Means Committee has 800 bills in front of it. And here we are, a week before the end of the Washington budget session. So I'm not thinking anything is going to come out of this. So, we've talked about, forging a compromise for 5 towns. Well, we did do outside section amendments to the budget with a 5-town pilot. Didn't happen. So the next step is to rent an airplane and fly it over the soccer finals that says secure remote participation is possible. The problem is that legislators don't respond to people who aren't their constituents. So we've got 1.7 million people across the state who don't know that this is possible. So the question is, how do you educate them? How do you make them aware? So we have spun up this big website on Wayland's webpage that goes through all of this stuff. We were at the Democratic Convention in Worcester last month. We buttonholed 300 people, took them through the showed them the website, all positive responses.
Can I ask a question, Dave?
Sure.
When you said do a pilot program for 5 towns, you showed earlier you did presentations or are doing presentations to a group, and I see that you have 10 or 16 co-sponsors. Are those co-sponsors towns that?
They're all legislators.
Okay. And so other than Wayland and Concord.
Wayland and Concord are the only 2 towns who've submitted home petitions.
Okay.
So that doesn't look real strong.
No. And then, any other towns are considering doing a town meeting vote?
Speaking bluntly, I would say that Weston is the next most advanced. There are other towns who are interested. I'm speaking in Westboro next month. But you guys are the furthest along and have a town meeting study committee, as Concord did, as Wayland did. May or may not, I don't know what the conclusion will be, but you are the next
Okay,
furthest.
that answers that. Thank you.
And the Weston Select Board actually wrote to the our legislators and asked them to support the 2274 bill, which was the one that would allow any town to opt in to a structure that provided for remote participation on a hybrid or fully remote cases.
It's just a question about the legislation, lawyer. There's something that triggered this thought that we're talking about, but we need to be concerned how the legislation is written.
Yes.
For some of those, there was just something that's like, oh, that's not going to depend on like how the legislation is actually written, the legislation that's passed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm not an attorney.
Yes.
So fortunately,
Yeah. I'm kind of.
So, I mean, there are different flavors already. Wayland's home rule petition and Concord's home rule petition look a lot alike. And each one of them is about 1.5 pages long. And it just says, we want to do remote participation, period.
Okay.
The home rule petition that Plymouth, as a representative town meeting town, had approved, gives them permanent authorization to do a hybrid meeting, is about 6 or 7 pages long. And it has a process through which the town meetings would go, but the towns would go to decide whether or not to proceed. And that was the model for 2274, which was the general legislation that would let a town opt in. And it basically put a burden on the moderator to either review or cause a review to be made of the technology, et cetera, and to make a determination that in their judgment, this could be done and could be done securely and so forth. And then the select board had to get on board and off you go.
So by 6 or 7 pages long, I'm inferring that you wouldn't necessarily need to work out every single policy issue before proceeding down this path.
Correct.
And indeed, you could make a policy decision when you're initially thinking about it, but once you get into it and start testing it, you could say, that didn't work so hot, so let's change this without having to go back to the state legislature.
I think that was the idea, was to create a framework that would provide a little more flexibility for the House to do things the way they want it to do.
But you want a
Yeah,
bylaw
yeah.
to be written as generally as possible, so that's.
It's optional.
So hard to change the bylaw.
Nobody's required to do this. It's entirely optional. So towns can opt in or opt out as they see fit.
Right, but you want sort of like maximum flexibility for a town under legislation. That the legislation is written something like so tight that it restricts something at a town level when in fact it's.
Well, for
Yeah.
example, one of the bills in front of Senator Olivier's bill 2197 says that the town has to vote for remote participation before each town meeting. So, which means that the town has to go through all the expense of preparing to do remote participation, but town meetings have decided not to use it.
So Dave and I have different views on this. I think that that's a good thing. And actually Plymouth's special legislation requires that at the beginning of the town meeting itself agree to proceed on a remote hybrid basis. If they decide not to do that, then the town meeting will adjourn and everybody will get together and they'll proceed. in
Right,
person.
that's a town by town suit.
But maybe a compromise would be that at each town meeting, you're voting on it, not for that town meeting, but for the next town meeting. And that way, you know, when you have to spend the money ahead of time.
Well, but bear in mind that when Dave's vision is fully realized, it's not going to be that expensive. We're not talking
That
about
is
spending a lot of money.
correct.
Right, you spend $300.
It's really going to be a question of whether does the town meeting want to proceed, given the fact that half the town doesn't have internet right now?
Yeah.
Or does the town want to proceed on a fully remote basis?
I mean, the main
Cost
cost,
too high here.
I don't know, that cuts both ways.
Not want to proceed because we think people who are against the position of the people in the room are voting
Right,
remotely.
that's exactly what I was gonna say, which is, I think that's subject to gaming. I think
Yeah.
people wanna,
Well, I just want to point out to you
Yeah.
that the town meeting itself is designed to be subject to game.
Amy,
Yeah.
I understand, but that's like the electoral college, it's designed to be subject to gaming. And everybody agrees it's a crappy system, so it's.
I see, I don't agree.
You don't-
I don't agree, not, I agree about electric college, but I believe you can, if you want to get people out for a particular thing, you gather up the citizens, you do a citizens petition, get enough people, you tell your neighbors to come. I mean, I'm
You
looking at
think
what
that's
happened. I'm looking at what happened with the school committee. That was a real,
That was a get out.
Yes, it
that was a get out the vote.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
And so,
The JST, the first 4 times was a get out the vote thing. They're all get out.
get out the vote.
that's how it works.
all right.
That's democracy.
Anyway,
So this is just showing you that slide just showed that there's a ton of companies now providing stuff. So this is just basically our approach, doing the RFP, doing a bunch of testing, mock town meetings, increasing number of mock. So this is just basic software development. And then eventually get to use it remotely and then. So I think that's it for me.
I have a question, Dave.
Yes.
So Dave,
go ahead, Michael.
I had a question. What, did you, have you made any guesses about how, if this is implemented, it would, the percentage of increase in participation, how many people would use it? And then further, would remote participation make town meeting longer because you might get more people who say, I don't really like walking up in front of a whole bunch of people and talking, but I don't mind talking into my phone. So you've lengthened the meeting. That part of the reason people don't go is it's too damn long.
So, the only test I've run, there's a thing called the Wayland Community Forum on Facebook, which had, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 people in it. And I posted a question there. I keep them abreast of what we're doing with this so that people are aware. And I asked, if remote participation were available, would you participate on premises or remotely? And 60% of the people who responded said that they would participate remotely. Okay, so
Wow.
that's part one. Part two is unquestionably, in my view, remote participation will make the meeting take longer, even if the total number of participants is the same, because the votes take a little longer. You have to allow a little more time for people to check, to audit, to do the discrepancy thing. You know, the moderator will get a feel for how long that is required, but it's going to make votes a little bit more lengthy. In Wayland, votes take 30, we have the window for 30 seconds.
Same.
I'm guessing it might expand from 30 seconds to 60 seconds. So if there are 50 votes, you're going to add, maybe 25 minutes to the meeting.
And Plymouth votes are only 20 seconds.
I'm sorry.
Votes in Plymouth are 20 seconds.
So
My understanding is that there's sort of a technological
Yeah.
issue here. If you have a limited number of voters, like a couple hundred people in
Mhm.
Plymouth, the system can digest those votes
That's the,
pretty fast.
Right.
If you have 1,000 voters, it takes a while for all of those votes to get
Talk.
okay.
fully
Yeah, we had
recognized by the
asked.
system.
So at Wayland, we've had a 30-second voter window from the beginning. Our moderator inquired, could we go to 20 seconds? And OTI said, you could go to 20 seconds if you have fewer than 400 participants on physically present, but above 400,
Yep.
they, for the reason that Rick just explained, they want 30 seconds.
Okay, so my question to you, in Wayland, did the question of remote voting, even come up to town meeting? Or was this just a recommendation of the committee?
So it's never been before town meeting, but I will tell you this.
Well, the whole rule petition was.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, so
Yes,
it was.
yes,
Okay.
yes, several times, and it was passed by 90%.
Okay.
So Rick's exactly right.
Okay.
We surveyed in West, surveys in Weston suggest that 75 to 80% of the people who self-selected and responded to the survey would be interested in seeing if they could do this.
So back in 2011, when we had the article proposing electronic on premises voting, there was another group that advocated the Australian ballot, which I know you're familiar with from your minutes. That got garnered 30% of the vote. We had to do a standing count because the moderator couldn't figure it out from the eyes and the no's. So 30% of the people were willing to throw town meeting over their shoulder and replace it with Australian ballot. So my view is, if we don't fix this disenfranchisement caused by the requirement of physical presence, we will eventually lose town meeting. That's personally.
I have a different view. But, and I'm not, I think that this committee should be looking into this stuff as well. If what's wanted is for everybody to have the opportunity to vote yes or no on, let's just say take the budget, let's just say the budget. Regardless of whether there's discussion, they're not interested in amending it. Select board puts a budget on the table. Everybody wants an opportunity to vote yes or no on that. I mean, effectively, we could make that happen with a home rule petition that required that every budget that's passed by town meeting be subjected to a referendum vote the week after the town meeting. And that would happen. We do that with respect to Prop 2.5. If we have a budget that exceeds the limits of Proposition 2.5, it's got to be approved at a ballot vote. We
Yeah,
could-
but that ballot vote precedes the town meeting.
Well, but not in every community, Michael.
In
Yeah.
our community, it does.
Yeah, it does, but it's not necessary that it does that. We could seek home rule petition, seek to reverse the order.
And then we will have to then go back for another town
Another
meeting because the budget, because everything failed.
I'm just saying
And we
that,
won't be able to enroll the new elected officials. I mean, how does that doesn't make sense.
well, this is a different debate, I think. Let's talk about this when it comes time to talk about that.
Okay,
But there are ways to enfranchise everybody in town. It's still not a way to compel them to vote or to compel them to even be interested.
Well,
And-
everyone's technically enfranchised now.
Well, That-
Yeah, I
that-
mean, like,
you're right, you're right.
Yes.
you are.
Yeah,
What you're
that's the
just
same.
saying is that the barriers to exercising that right are high
Yeah, certainly for some people.
So
for some people.
just a thought experiment. From my perspective, I think that this remote participation is a great thing to do as an accommodation for people who can't get to a town meeting. I don't think of it as an alternative way of conducting the town's business by having people on their phones just voting. I mean, that's fine, but I believe in the legislative fiction, if you want to call it that, that's what we're doing. If you really don't want to have a citizen legislature, then this committee should recommend that we do something different. And we could,
I think
because
that's
we have a lot of flexibility.
I think that's the crux of the philosophical issue, because See, I have a different point of view, which is that right now the system disenfranchises people by erecting barriers that are just too great for most people. I mean,
And what are those barriers? Would you consider those barriers
the
to be?
time, babysitting, the fact that there's, like 90% of the stuff that happens in town meeting is kind of technocratic. I mean, look at the last town meeting. There were all those CPC votes for, $500,000 for stuff that 95% of people, 95% of people in town don't care about.
Well, you
But,
have
but
stuff-
then it
but-
fails.
But,
I mean, we've
but-
had CPA votes that failed, John, you know
Right,
that.
but the point that I'm making is that right now the system is a lot like whole tax system in the South before, the civil rights movement, which is, yeah, everybody who pays $50 gets to vote, not a problem.
So,
And it's sort of like, there are a lot of people who didn't have $50. I think there are a lot of people who just are like, I don't want to sit through these mind-numbing CPC votes, and you're making me get a babysitter and go sit there for 4 hours
Then I'm
to
making
vote on
you
this one
sit
thing.
there with that phone saying, I'm here,
Well,
I'm here.
but that's different from, then my little kid is sleeping in his bedroom and I'm also watching, Love Boat on the TV while I'm doing this. But I'm still, I still have a little stand and I can wait while I watch, something on Amazon Prime until it gets to Article 87, where I get to vote on, the thing that I care about. So.
I have a question for you about that. That's a legitimate
I mean,
concern.
that's a philosophical thing. I understand.
I don't know how many people there are who honestly feel that way. I will point out just town elections are a good example of just how interested are people in participating in some of these decisions. We had a consequential decision to increase the size of our select board, 3 to 5. Couldn't have had a higher profile. Couldn't have been more sort of important for the town to take advantage of. Could not have been easier for every single voter to participate without even leaving their house by getting a mail-in ballot. Less than 10%, fewer than 10% of the registered voters participated in that decision. Fewer than 10% participated in the decision. About 6% of the registered voters thought it was a good idea.
But my point in rebuttal to that would be that's twice or 3 times as many who go to a normal town meeting. And so if you could make this easier to participate in some of these decisions, you'll get more people, and it might not ever be more than 20%. I mean, if you look at the number of people who vote in a real election, it's only 20% of the voters, 25% of voters.
So that may be the upper bound.
The upper bound. But if you could get it from 3% to 8% or some number like that, or 3% to 9% would be a 200% improvement in what we have now.
What I was
Well,
bothered with.
Can I,
Just like
Yep.
Michael, what Dave said, when he asked what percentage of people would do online participation, that was a large number. And that number is bothersome to me. I can see it if I'm sick but I just don't want to go out because I don't like parking. It's late at night. I want to watch Love Boat. No, I think democracy you have to work at. And
But that 60% could have been parents with young kids and disabled people who want to participate.
so, hey, excuse me, but aren't we going off the topic? I mean,
Yes.
we have Dave here to tell us about what his group looked at and the various features and the technology. And now we're talking about what we think about remote
You're right.
voting. I don't think that's on our agenda, and I don't think it's
So I have-
accomplishing much right now.
I have one more point to make. So there are 2, I think, towns that are currently allowing remote participation by disabled voters. One is North Andover, moderator Mark DeSalvo, president of the Mass Moderator Association. The other, Carlisle, moderator Rick Davis. In the case of Carlisle, I believe that they use Zoom for listening and speaking, and they have an assistant moderator at an assisted living facility who text the note into the moderator. I don't know how Mark Salvo does it.
I don't know how he does it. I'll point out that, every community is able to do that. On our town meeting warrant, we say if you require an accommodation, please let us know.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
the
Accommodation.
important point is
Yeah,
that
it's
Mark
not just
Salvo
the accommodation.
had the attorney general basically review what he was doing and got his view.
Yeah, and there's a general attorney general's opinion that says that for purposes of addressing ADA compliance, it is permissible to use Zoom as a participation technology for people who can't be physically present at a town meeting. So
So,
it's legitimate.
so
Yes.
as a result of that, there's another path that we are considering as an alternative to legislative authorization. Because we in fact already have authorization to do a pilot with disabled people. So I have had this discussion with our fire groups in the TI, basically along the lines of, instead of a 3 to 5 town general pilot, what if we were to do a pilot with disabled participants only? And the rationale is that not only would this be useful for open town meeting towns with disabled voters, but Plymouth will love it because they are legislatively authorized and the software would make their life much easier. So it would be software that would be used. So that's another way to skin the cat without having to go all the way through legislation to enable us to get started. Because from the day that somebody says go, this is a 3-year enterprise. From the day we say we're about to build it, till we go through all of the RFP and the testing and all the rest of it, that's 3 years. So if we can at least test in a number of towns with disabled voters, get some sense that this works, and have the same software being used in representative town meetings, that might be enough to then convince the legislature to open doors and to allow more software to participate.
Could you entice enough or even one software company to do it if what they view as the potential market is only, a couple of dozen disabled people as opposed to
In multiple towns.
okay, so in 10 towns there are 10 disabled people, it's 100 people.
That's my challenge.
I'm
I'm down that road.
okay. I mean,
I haven't
it
gotten
could
the yes
be,
yet.
it could be that the answer, I mean, if I'm the CEO of a software company or a software development company, I would say, sure, I'll do it for you. It's going to cost you 200 grand,
We have no budget.
right. As opposed to if I'm the CEO of a software development company, we could say, look, we already did the intellectual work to conceptualize this and figure out how this thing works. All you have to do is program it. And the market for this is 250 towns that have 1.7 million people in it.
So OTI wrote software to allow representative town meetings to vote remotely, to be voted. It was not only used at Plymouth, it was used in Lexington.
Okay.
It was hard to use for the reasons we already discussed. A select board member in Lexington wrote an integrated system and they threw out OTI stuff and are using that. So OTI has reason to improve their system for representative town meeting. Our approach would do exactly that. So there may be enough of a thread here in terms of a total available market to be able to convince them to move forward. I don't know.
If you said to them, my guess is if you said to them, the end game is we're going to empower 100 people to, disabled people to remotely vote, they would say, thanks, but no thanks. But if you said, look, this is step one of a multi-step process that really is intended to get this.
Exactly how I
used
understood
by-
Mark.
Right, okay.
So I think it was in Plymouth that they have to offer training to everyone to use it. So I was thinking, once you have the system and you tested it, you still have to have end user training of some sort available. Any idea what that looks like, how hard it is for people to
Well-
use, because in my experience, you should not overestimate people's ability to use even very simple software.
So you can have an open town meeting, mock open town meeting running 24/7, 365 days a year with an AI as a moderator where people can practice and get feedback.
Or when they come in to register remotely, the town clerk does a run through. This is what you're doing.
That's a little high overhead for a town clerk. I mean, not that you couldn't do it if you wanted to, but I think you have to do a YouTube video. I think you have to do an AI assisted walkthrough. I think you have to do basically a mock town meeting run by an AI that anybody can get in and try out and, go through a couple of votes and see how it works and audit your vote and all the rest. So the good news in it is we have a lot of technology we used to have even when we started. So
There was a very interesting, in the MMA document that you circulated, there was a very interesting chart. It was basically a 2x2 matrix, and it was something like same time, same place, different place. And it talked about the policy considerations for where, if you wanted to have the deliberation in same time, same place, different place, what you'd have to work through. There's another possibility it raises. If it's different place, different time, what you're in effect saying is, rather than having to participate in that time meeting, I can participate in a rolling deliberation that happens in the 10 days before, that culminates in the 4-hour town meeting at which the vote actually happens. So in effect, what you're doing is you're not shortcutting, you're long cutting the deliberative process. You're piling on more deliberation to what could happen in the town meeting. And that may make the town meeting a 2-hour town meeting instead of 4-hour town meeting.
well, so for the moderation that has to be recording.
So Concord, that was one of their proposals, was that they would do these pre-meetings. And they've got 3 pre-meetings a couple of weeks ahead of the town meeting,
Right.
where everything is, the financial articles have gone through, the planning board articles have gone through, and there is that discussion, and that all happens, and no votes are taken. And that does get a lot of questions answered. And by the time they get to town meeting, it's pretty efficient. And we already have a pretty efficient town meeting.
Yeah.
I know that some people think that it's longer than it needs to be, and that's probably
Well, it's
true.
a lot better than it used to be.
Article preparation is critical.
Yeah, and I know
And
we,
voter-
Agenda.
Voter preparation is the way that they come to it.
I think just that it's part of, I think remote voting is one question, but I think one question we also have to think about is, again, 16, whatever. The issues weren't super complicated, right? Like these guys all knew like how to do the fence or make a decision about what the cattle should do. But our issues today are complicated. The process, not all of them, but some are complicated. It's a 2-3 year process before something comes before town meeting. I think part of, we should somehow encourage people to be, if you really care, come into the process earlier. Don't be the person who stands up at town meeting and says like, hi, have you considered that? When it was,
I know,
there's a part of that too, about what the deliberation and where input into the decision making process probably can't all take place in 1 3-hour town meeting. In fact,
How many 3A meetings did the planning board have? They had a ton of 3As, but
We got a couple more minutes before we said we were gonna quit.
Yeah.
Anything online for Dave at this point? No, not from Michael, not from John. My quick takeaway is Dave has demonstrated to me anyway, that this is feasible. That remote participation can be enabled by technology, that there's a path to do that, several paths actually. Maybe some experimental paths that we can pursue without the benefit of special legislation and without the benefit of Dave. But certainly, I think that the question of whether this committee ought to be recommending that the town seek special legislation to permit us to do this sort of thing is at least part of the answer to that question is, doesn't seem to be a technological reason to say no to that. We haven't really gotten into the interface with the town clerk's office too much, but depending on how it's done and whether it's one and done for 10 years or whether you got to go in every time is one way of dealing with that sort of obstacle. But if there are no more questions for Dave right now, I think we probably should take a moment to consider what we're going to do next on remote participation. Just a moment to decide that we're going to talk about other issues, maybe at our next meeting, because there must be other issues besides remote participation that we ought to talk about. And thank Dave. Sure.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Any parting shots?
Parting shots, one time.
No, I think that what you've done is fantastic, and I'd love to have you involved in some of the policy discussions because you thought about all of those too.
So let me be clear that I'm the chair of a 6-person committee. And what you saw is the work product of that committee, not just me.
Yeah.
So, and a number of moderators, including Boris, have contributed to it.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Oops. Stop share.
This issue that you raise about voter preparation, though, is we'll have another meeting where we discuss that, but you're going to start. My view is you're pulling on the loose thread of a sweater. That there's a ton of issues that have nothing to do with voter participation that expose all sorts of deficiencies in the way that the town is run.
Well, isn't this one of our questions that we should decide?
Oh, yeah.
And maybe that should,
Hi,
Dave.
I know.
Maybe that should be what we concentrate on for the next meeting. And, because with remote participation, one of the issues I do have is you're not really listening to what's going on in here. So when we have, meetings beforehand, where you discuss it, we have the budget hearings, you have planning board hearings and things like that. Even for the sidewalk committee for Route 30, it came up and it would be interesting to know numbers of people that actually attend these information meetings and see those numbers versus the numbers of people that will go to town meeting and support and oppose something. Maybe we should look at information meetings and how valid they are for town meeting, because this is one of our questions: how do we make town meeting more efficient?
What? Since we're out of time, why don't we frame up the next meeting as talking about that topic, but I would call it part of a broader topic of the way in which deliberation broadly construed happens, because that's a subset of how do you gather information, analyze the information, debate policy issues, and so on, of which public information sessions and feedback sessions are only one step of a 5 or 7 step process.
See, with that, I would want to know.
I mean, we already know the answer. The answer is the 3A thing. 20 people participated in 8 meetings or something like that. We don't have to ask anybody to do it. We already know the answer to that.
But maybe one of the issues would be that you could talk to the sidewalk committee. They've had so many meetings now that they've extended this.
Yep. Kind of. But again, even there were 20 or 30 people in each of those meetings. 20, there was the committee, the consultants, and then maybe 20 or 30 people, which is and 2/3 of them were butters. And when I walked into the last one, the first thing that Jay, what's his name? I told him the first thing that Jay, he didn't even say hello. He said, "Are you in a butter?" I'm like, "No." Well, hi, I'm John Sally. but
I know you're
anyway.
pro or con,
But-
or you're
but-
gonna call.
Yeah, no, that's a good, no, that's,
Yeah.
I think that's a great
Yeah.
topic for the next meeting. I mean, if you want to do that myself.
You know,
Because I think that's a huge problem right now in the way that stuff happens. I mean, but it goes both ways. You could say nobody participated in any of these 3A things, and so it ended up being more difficult than it could have been. And I would point out to the water tank thing and said nobody participated in the water tank thing, and it got voted down twice because the staff work that was done leading up to it was completely crappy. And if they'd done a better job, it would have been a no-brainer when it got to town meeting.
Well, I'm not gonna get into the crappy conversation with you. That's a characterization of it. But a lot of work
Okay.
went into these things. Doesn't get a lot of attention. And sooner or later, people pay attention to something and they say, I have an issue here.
Right.
And that happens repeatedly. My favorite example is the JST.
Mhm.
How many times did we come back and reconsider that?
Until
least-
the final time,
At
it
least
was
five.
the answer being the final time was the same answer as the first time. So that's another dimension of this, which is it takes a while for it to sink into people what the right answer is.
That's true.
You don't pay attention until you
You don't pay
have to,
attention
or
until
someone
you have
gets
to pay
you
attention,
agitated about it.
or until
I
it's
think
like the
that's all
fourth
true.
time and you're sick of it.
However, conversations can happen where you say that that's not the best way to go, realistically.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't speak. I don't know. I only pay attention.
Well,
when I find
it would be good if we
stuff.
figured this out before we spend $400 million on the schools, though.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we've spent, I don't know what we spent on the schools over the time that I've been living in town. I don't know if it's a total of $400 million by now.
No, no.
I know we rebuilt the high school and the middle school once, we rebuilt field school twice, and we did all the other elementary schools at least once from the ground up.
And the total, my order of magnitude memory number is all of that together is
Less than this.
is less than $100 million.
Oh, I don't.
oh,
think
no,
that-
it was much
That's-
more. Tony was the school committee chair, I can tell you.
But I mean, fair point. I think one of the questions for us is town meeting the right way for us as a community to make some of these decisions? Is deliberation something, the deliberation of the body of the whole, the committee of the whole, the right way to make some of these decisions?
Right.
For the most part, whatever the select board comes up with and recommends at town meeting gets a vote. The budget, I mean, the closest budget vote I can remember was still 2/3 in favor of the budget.
Right.
Last time, I think the budget passed 93% vote, something
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
I mean, by your standard, John, we should include the budget in the consent agenda because we spend too much time on it. Because it's not discussed. Nobody moves to amend it. Nobody has any questions about it. Just takes 25 minutes to a half an hour to present.
Well, and even back, 6-8 years ago, when there was a separate budget hearing, maybe it was 10 years ago. I went to a couple of those, and literally it was the FinCom, one or two members of the select board.
And all the other
two or-
boards that were
and
doing the
two-
presentation.
And
yeah.
anybody who was making a presentation, and two people,
Yeah.
it'd be like,
Yeah.
it'd be like, I can't even remember their names anymore, but it was the same two guys. It was Dave Harmon.
And David Lindsay, 56 Rolling Lane.
No, it was Tom.
I'm so
Exactly. It was Tom
Oh.
Seldorf and Dave Harmon were the only two people. Anyway, no, this is that. Yeah. Anyway,
I mean, it might be, not my view, but it might be that this committee is going to say, town meeting has really had its run and we ought to elect a town council of 12 people or something like that and let them make the decisions. But the thing is, the way we do it now, if you don't like a decision or if you have a strong opinion, you can participate. You not only get to speak, but you get to vote. And if you don't care to speak, you don't have to. If you don't care to vote, you don't have to. Most people,
you don't have to, right?
you don't have to. You don't have to. I mean, we could impose it on people and make them come, but that wouldn't work out in America. I don't know. And deliberation, maybe deliberation is vastly overrated. Maybe the only deliberation that happens on any of these things is within the select board.
I don't actually think there's a lot of deliberation at town meeting. I think there's a lot of presentation of things I could read in a warrant,
Right.
or presentation of, well, for example, I was at the rec commission, right? I was at a rec commission meeting presenting something. But they were presenting on the firehouse.
Yep.
Which was way more detailed than the presentation we got at town meeting. And if you ask questions, everything is a back and forth. I don't really feel like that happens in town meeting. I know town meeting gives people who speak the other way. But there's not a lot of like, oh, good point, John. You know, I never thought of it that.
I have another question. Do you think that should have happened?
I think in an ideal world that is what was meant
But I'm going to
by
say
deliberation.
it does happen. I'll give you the perfect example. Remember when there was this plan to do all this landscaping around the Scout House? It had, everyone was approving it. It was, we're going to spend the money. And someone from the Scouts came up and said, it's very nice, but you can't see the kids and you can't do this. And that was and then people started thinking about that. And even though you had all the boards say the wonderful landscaping, the town said no, because someone said, but what about the visibility of the kids with other people? You can't see.
Yeah, that's still not what I consider debate. That's just one person who stood up and made a point.
Yeah.
But I didn't really, if I'd been there and said like, okay, one Scouts, you don't own the land, it's town land, nice that you want. There's a whole lot of discussion that could happen. That's just pretty sure I know who stood up and said that. But and people listened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not deliberation or debate. That's still just talking and hearing the point. The difference between having a conversation and wrestling with an idea.
An alternative point of view is that was not actually a matter of deliberation and people changing their minds. That was a matter of bad work that went into that, because if you thought about it for 10 minutes, you would realize that the people who actually use that triangle it's the Scouts, and they actually do use it. And if you didn't actually pay a lot of attention to what they said, even before you asked somebody to put that on the warrant, that was a bad analysis. And I think that's what happened. Not that, oh, we had this great debate and we all changed our mind. That was not it. It was bad. It was bad.
Do you think we have the appetite for a real debate on much of anything in town?
Do what?
An appetite for a real debate in the room at town meeting to make a decision.
At town meeting?
At town meeting.
Yeah.
I
The
would,
only one I can remember one where I think it kind of happened.
where was that? Which was that?
That was the MWRA big tank proposal. Where the MWRA wanted to build a 100 million gallon tank on what was the conservation land that the Danforth family had given the town or sold.
Right.
And every board committee in town had to vote by, I think it was a 2/3 majority to support the proposal.
Yeah.
And then the town meeting had to pass it. And then each branch of the legislature had to pass it. And the governor had to approve it. And everybody in town, all the committees lined up, and it had been, I want to say it had been at least 3 years in conversation with everybody. And there was a passionate presentation. There was a discussion. There was back and forth about it. And the town voted it down. And then the legislature took the property and gave it to the MWRA. And thankfully gave us the money that the MWRA had agreed to give us. So,
Yeah.
but I'm skeptical that the town really has the appetite for a true, open, democratic deliberation.
Well, then, in that case, why do we have town meeting? Why don't we just decide what stuff gets decided by the select board or a town council or whoever, and what gets put on a referendum?
Well, I mean, there's
the question.
a
right
question.
here.
Right.
I mean, but so far, I don't think that when asked, the town hasn't expressed support for that. But as with everything else, all of these surveys are self-selecting people are responding. The only people who respond are the ones who have a point of view they want to express. And it's probably the case that most people in town, for one reason or another, however you want to characterize it, are indifferent to whatever's happening at town meeting, whatever's going on in town government.
even
it doesn't affect
the vote. I mean, 80% of people don't vote when we have an election. So that
we look for in the presidential elections, we vote, but I think that's sort of vanity voting, performance voting. Because you look at tribal declaration.
yeah.
And
Maybe we could discuss that at some point too.
that would be okay.
Not the presidential voting for sure.
Okay, I gotta go.
I gotta go too.
I move that we adjourn.
Second,
All in favor? Aye. John, Donald left, I already left a long time ago.
we still have.
I thought that was great. Thanks very much for
That was all.
thinking to invite him and thinking and inviting him in. The fact that he came, I thought that was really valuable.
And answering
I
questions.
think so too. And he does have, to your point, he has a lot of, views about the policy questions. He's had these conversations with dozens of other people.
Spent 10 years talking about it, so I'm sure he does.
Yeah. And there are other, I think that, any one or more, if you think that there's somebody from the Concord Town Meeting Study Committee that might be useful to have a conversation with about some of the policy questions, will kind of lead us through that process.
Maybe I might defer on that for another meeting or two.
Yeah.
But the one thing I had suggested that in preparation for this meeting, we watch the League of Women Voters presentation. It's basically the slides that we just presented, which I did again. I thought it was pretty valuable. The thing that I might recommend for our next discussion is to go back to that piece that you circulated from the MMA. That was basically, it's longer, it's probably a 10-page thing that you have to read through, but it lays out all of these policy issues and stuff. And it's, give us a big head start on that discussion when we have it next time.
Good. I think that's a good suggestion. It's definitely worth reading again. It's a little bit dated. I feel as if it's maybe 5 or 10 years old now. It was looking forward, but it only looked forward so far. And it said, we're not going to look into this remote participation thing because that's kind of taboo.
Right.
And frankly, the Mass Moderators Association is still reluctant to do that.
The policy issues are still the policy issues though. So those are sort of timeless.
Yeah.
It's a philosophical issue. There's a philosophical issue about how we govern.
Right.
Political philosophy.
Yeah. On a national basis, it's pretty clear that this isn't the right way to do it, the way we do it. If you know me,
150 years, we finally got to the end of the road.
I have to take issue with one thing you said, and that was that the issues that they were dealing with way back then weren't complicated. They actually dealt with revolution in town meetings. And they had discussions in Weston about whether or not they were going to send somebody to this committee on correspondence and what the town's position was going to be with respect to the king and, declaring independence. I think that's pretty consequential stuff.
Yeah, and that's true democracy. I mean, that was consequential. So go and look at some of those, if you can read what they said, which I can't decipher.
Sorry.
Weston was a Tory town, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
We were split.
Well, it was split, but
Golden Bowl